You know, every time someone like you asks me to describe my imbuing, I always find myself falling back to the same old clip. Here, I'll show it to you. It's from They Live, you know, the old Carpenter movie from '88. It's perfect in literally every way, and you will never be able to convince me that he was talking about the capitalist elite or some kind of secret society conspiracy when he made that movie. No, it's clear as daylight that John Carpenter's one of us, and if he's not, at least he knows the truth just like you and I do. It's a pity people are trying to pin all these theories on it when it's so obvious he's talking about all these monsters that are all around us. See that? When he first puts on the sunglasses? That was me. I'd just been laid off during the last round of downsizing. I mean, I'm a computer tech originally, wet my teeth during the bubble in the 90s, and worked server maintenance for one of the big ones for close to 20 years. But you know, these days you don't do in-house hiring anymore. Especially not for stuff you need some bottom-wage mook for hire to come in and take a look at once a month. I mean, sure, we've got enough processing power to bring us to Jupiter and back if we wanted, but there's no grace to it. Every time there's a hiccup or some shit code in the system, they just throw more RAM at it, brute force it. It used to be an art, you know, and I was an artist. I could optimize the shit out of a 486 and have it run email services for 3 dozen offices at once with no hiccups. But I guess a living wage is too much to ask for these days. Right, anyway, so I'd been laid off and I was pissed off about it, rightly so, walking down Madison Street towards the harbor and trying my damnedest not to take it out on whatever garbage can or newspaper rack that was in my way, when I caught the headlines of one of those financial magazines. You know, the one not meant for us Joes, the ones talking about the stock market and where to write your private helicopter off for maximum tax benefits. And it said, "Look behind you." Now, for a second, it honestly didn't even register to me. I mean, I'd seen weirder headlines in my days. But then for some reason, I thought, might as well. And that saved my ass, I'm not kidding you. I glanced over my shoulder, and I saw 2 corpses, honest to God fucking zombies, with their arms stretched out and just limping down the sidewalk. One of them 2 feet away from grabbing my neck. I mean, I had the brains not to immediately set off running, but instead I just took a detour into an alley while I tried to make some sense of what I'd just seen. Rotten corpses walking around? Had me getting fired fried the last of my brain cells? I mean, you can relate, right? But before I could come to any kind of conclusion about it, those 2 joined me in the alley. Now, I've learned since then that they're walkers, you know, these undead freaks, and that they're sometimes able to pass as living people while they do whatever the hell they're doing. But to me, it was clear there wasn't anything living about them. One of them was missing half her face, her jaw hanging slack and dangling by a few threads, and the other looked like he dried up like a mummy, skin all wrinkly and crackled like old leather while he was wearing the suit he probably wore when they put him in the ground. Honest to God, at that moment I kind of just wanted to sit down and let them do whatever the hell they wanted with me. But then I saw the man pull out a gun from his pockets. Something inside me just snapped. I mean, you'll laugh when I tell you, but I was actually genuinely pissed off that this zombie piece of shit was going to shoot me. I'm getting shot to death by the Walking Dead? I mean, come on. And that's when I heard the voice too, and it was what pushed me into action. Something spoke to me, and I remember the feeling more than the words. And the feeling was simple. End them. I mean, I'd never fought another person in my life before then, at least not since growing up. I was a desk jockey, for Christ's sake. At most, I'd seen Fight Club and thought it had been a cool idea, but I'd left it at that. But at that moment, I grabbed what was closest to me, an old screwdriver, and I drove it into the skull of the one with the gun, right through his eye. I mean, he toppled over with a hissing noise, and the other one just kind of stared at me as I knocked her over and kicked her head in against a brick wall. Once it was done, the panic of what I'd done came over me. What the fuck had just happened? Zombies weren't real. Had I actually gone insane? Had I had some kind of hallucination and killed 2 innocent people? I mean, I threw up, not just because of the smell, and then I stumbled out of the alley the other way after making sure to pocket the gun I'd taken from the first one. Somehow I got away without anyone pinning it on me, some kind of fucking miracle. No cops came after me, no phone calls, nothing. I mean, I got back to my apartment and I started to clean it out, and a couple of days later I left the city and got on the first Greyhound out of town towards my home state of Idaho, and I never looked back. I thought that would be the end of it, but just outside of North Powder, shit town in the middle of nowhere, at a rest stop, I saw a fucking ghost. A ghost, right? He was following this young woman around, and she didn't even seem to notice, but I decided to go after her, just on a hunch. But before I could do anything, though, a pair of hunters, the ones you met before, Jill and Hank over there, they conjured up some sick fires from heaven or something like that, and they sent that spirit running with its tail between its legs. Now, had it been me, I wouldn't have let it get away, but, to each their own. I made myself known once the girl had left, none the wiser, of course, and they told me what they knew. They told me about the imbuing. They told me about the messengers, or heralds, or whatever you want to call them, and they told me about being a hunter. Since then, I've gotten an even 20 kills under my belt, most of them walking dead, but I'm pretty sure I've killed myself a warlock once. Fucker tried to sacrifice a minor league baseball team. Can you believe that? I've also confirmed 2 vampires, too, even though I got nothing to show for it, on account of them turning to dust when I cut their heads off. So, what's your story, kid? As the end times approach, it becomes more and more clear that the lid that has been keeping the existence of the supernatural creatures of the world of darkness from public knowledge is about to be janked off violently. Vampiric jihads, the werewolves' increasingly desperate fight against the worm and its servants, and the technocrats' attempt to outmaneuver their traditions and their archaic views on magic are all bubbling beneath the surface, and the pot is about to boil over. Hunters, the Imbued, are regular mortals granted the sudden and traumatic awareness that they are, in fact, living in a world of darkness. Regular Joes and Janes, they are thrust into this ancient and lethal world woefully unprepared and under-equipped, but through a combination of luck, skill, and powers granted to them by mysterious messengers, they desperately wage their war against these monsters who live off humanity like parasites. There is no ancient lineage of Imbued, there's no secret society or government agency, there is no pattern who gets chosen by these messengers, and whatever organization exists among the hunters are all new and blindly fumbling, growing only through lethal trial and error as they familiarize themselves with a shadow world that has been occupied by these unnatural horrors since time immemorial. Some hunters seek only to exterminate these creatures, while others take a more careful, analytical approach, and some even try to bargain or deal with the night folk, wishing to learn more about them, and possibly even find a means of peaceful coexistence. This approach and philosophy is reflected in a hunter's creed, which, when a hunter is imbued, they embrace as their approach and outlook in their war to protect humanity. Broadly speaking, 3 virtues exist that these hunters embrace: the virtue of mercy, of vision, and of zeal. Mercy, of course, does not necessarily mean that they will spare their foes, and zeal may not imply that these hunters will kill all they come across. But in more broader terms, these virtues reflect how the hunters perceive their task and their own roles as hunters. These 3 virtues are then further divided into 3 creeds each, although 2 creeds were lost to the virtue of vision, as those who follow these creeds are driven insane and are unable to function even on the level of other imbued hunters, their senses overwhelmed by the presence of monsters in the world. These creeds all have powers known as edges, granted to them by the messengers when they were imbued. The origins of these powers are unknown, but they can grant the imbued the powers to heal grievous wounds, to recognize monsters in a crowd of people, or even foresight, and of course the ability to strike these creatures down with righteous fury. Regarding the messengers, or heralds as some hunters call them, no imbued can agree on their origin. Some hunters argue that they are all part of a massive government experiment, while others will instead say that they are chosen by angels of God, or that extraterrestrial life accidentally unleashed these monsters upon humanity once, and are now creating the imbued to help battle them. Whatever the reasoning behind the messengers and their choice of the imbued, it is clear that there is an intention for the hunters to fight against these monsters, or at least confront them. Why else would their powers be so focused on these invisible threats? Once imbued, a hunter can no longer ignore the corruption and darkness all around them. They see the trail of rot that leads to their own loss of work, or the death of a loved one, or the growing crime rate of a city. They come to the often painful realization that so much of humanity's suffering is not because of themselves, but because of the creatures much older and more powerful than them, seeing them as little more than cheap pawns to use and discard as they see fit. Hunters are rare, many of them operating alone or in a small cell, but thanks to a mysterious website known as hunternet.org, they are able to exchange vital pieces of information with each other. This website, of course, can only provide basic information. It does little to help prepare a hunter for the actual act of tracking down and slaying their enemy. And on the topic of enemies, the most common foes of the hunters are the undead, the walking dead, zombies, ghouls, or whatever other term that is used for them. These seem to have grown in numbers rapidly for the last couple of years, and they come in many different variations. Some are able to pass completely as humans, while others are little more than rotten corpses, driven by some malicious intent, and they wear their decaying bodies as suits. Some hunters struggle with the fact that they need to track down and slay those undead who still appear human. Some may try to study them, guide them, or otherwise attempt to minimize the harm they may cause. But ultimately, a walking dead will forever remain a creature of evil that must be brought down. Naturally, hunters may go after vampires, werewolves, wraiths, and even changelings. It all depends on how poor these creatures are at hiding their true nature, and how gung-ho the hunters are. Although still young and inexperienced, the Imbued have already proven to be quite a threat against the creatures of the night, and as their numbers grow and their knowledge deepens, who knows if they may end up rewriting the fate of the world as Gehenna comes closer. The three grandchildren of Cain wait patiently for the time of judgment to arise. Bambi Parsons, a leader with an unbreakable will, Primogen, reborn as a god amongst Cain's angels, and Dougal, whose thirst for blood is matched only by his strength of will and purpose. Their children, the Methuselah, control our every move through their timeless jihad. They are Her Satanic Majesty Danny, whose mere presence chills the heart, Maximilian S. Hardcastle, a tutor and master of the jihad, Socrates Johnson, a masterful craftsman of stories, Lauren Eason, a trustworthy ally and friend, Alexander Canehurst, inquisitive explorer and steward of the Canehursts, and Snow, who oversees the progress of the council patiently from the shadows. On the council of the Primogen are seated Edward Reed, Colin Gifford, 06, Ian Nichols, the Black Friar, Brandon Hunter Hayden, the Autumn Alchemist, and Michelle Light, wise leaders and of good judgment. This week, the Council would wish to thank the Elder Evelyn, and we deeply appreciate your support and wise counsel. We would also wish to thank the Ancilla Get of Mathrox, who has remained a staunch supporter through times of peace and times of trouble. Naturally, all our elders, Ancilla and neonates receive our gratitude from the bottoms of our hearts. Without your support, this would not be possible. And thank you for watching. Humanity is plagued by monsters. What will you do about it?